Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso and I'll be going through another short discourse of the Buddha. This one is from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 51, sutta number 15, the Uṇṇābhabrāhmaṇasutta. So I'll start with paying homage to the Buddha and then I'll read through the discourse and give some explanations. And you can type in questions at any time and I'll answer them at the end. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So as mentioned, this is Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 51, sutta number 15. The Uṇṇābhabrāhmaṇasutta, the discourse to a Brahmin named Uṇṇābha. So the discourse begins, thus have I heard. So I'll be reading from Bhante Suddhāso's translation, but I might adjust things a bit as I go along. So, thus have I heard. At one time, Venerable Ānanda was staying near Kosambi in Gosita's monastery. Then Uṇṇābha the Brahmin went up to Venerable Ānanda and exchanged greetings with him. So just a brief comment here. So of course, Venerable Ānanda was the Buddha's chief attendant who spent most of his monastic life in the Buddha's presence. And Venerable Ānanda was particularly famous for memorizing everything that the Buddha said. So Venerable Ānanda was considered the foremost in memorizing the suttas. So he had an enormous body of knowledge about the Buddha's teachings. And there's a handful of suttas where Venerable Ānanda gives Dhamma talks or answers questions, again, based upon his extensive and thorough knowledge of the sutta. So Ānanda is commonly held up as the archetype of the scholar monk, the study monk from the time of the Buddha. And this particular discourse, you'll notice that the way it started is that Uṇṇābha the Brahmin went to Venerable Ānanda and just exchanged greetings with him. So this indicates that Uṇṇābha the Brahmin was not Buddhist and didn't have any particular esteem or regard for Buddhist monks. Enough to have a polite conversation, but not enough to actually make any show of respect. So the sutta continues, it says, when the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to him, Worthy Ānanda, what's the purpose of leading the spiritual life under the contemplative Gotama? A couple comments here. So first off, notice again that Uṇṇābha refers to the Buddha as the Samana Gotama, so the contemplative Gotama. This also, again, is a clear indication that Uṇṇābha was not a Buddhist. A Buddhist would never refer to the Buddha as the contemplative Gotama. They would refer to him as the Buddha, as the Bhagava, as the Tathagata. They would always use a very lofty title when referring to the Buddha. They would never refer to him simply by name. And it says, the translation here says, the purpose of leading the spiritual life. So the Pali term here translated as spiritual life is brahmacharya. And while brahmacharya does have a literal meaning, which can be translated as divine life or holy life or godly life, or more loosely spiritual life. Brahmacharya in the context of ancient Indian religion implies a celibate monastic life, a celibate contemplative life. So it does literally mean divine life. So Brahma means God or divinity. And charya means conduct or way of behavior. So brahmacharya means to behave in a divine way, divine behavior, godly behavior, a holy life, holy conduct. But it was understood that this necessarily included celibacy, chastity, and also that it meant that one was committed to some kind of spiritual contemplative practice. So saying somebody was living the brahmacharya by default meant that they were a celibate, contemplative, monastic of some kind. So Uṇṇābha the Brahmin here he's asking basically what's the purpose of being a Buddhist monk? So the way he phrases it is, what's the purpose of leading the spiritual life under the contemplative Gautama? But basically he's saying, what's the point of being a Buddhist monk? And Ānanda replies, very simply, he says, the purpose of leading the spiritual life under the Buddha is to give up desire. Now, which is a reasonable enough answer, especially if one has some familiarity with Buddhism and one knows that desire is the cause of all suffering. Then we know that if we want to eliminate suffering and be truly happy, then we need to give up desire. So the Brahmin further asks Ānanda, he says, is there a path and a practice for giving up that desire? And Ānanda says, there is. And the Brahmin asks, what is that path? And Ānanda replies, it's when a mendicant develops the basis of success that has samadhi due to enthusiasm, energy, mental development, inquiry, and active effort. This is the path and the practice for giving up that desire. So this requires a little bit of explanation here. So the translation is actually quite loose. So the Pali is Idabhikkhu tanda samadhi padana sankhara samannagatang iddipadang bhaveti. Then the same for virya samadhi padana sankhara samannagatang, chitta and vimamsa. First off, this is the 4 iddhipada, and the word iddhi means success or accomplishment or achievement. In some contexts, it also means psychic power, but in this context, translating iddhi as psychic power is a little bit of a stretch. So although Bhante Suddhāso's translation here does say psychic power, I actually don't agree with that. So I think in this context, the more ordinary meaning of iddhi as accomplishment or success is better. And then pada, the word pada means a path or a step, or can also mean a basis, a footing. So what is the footing, the basis for success, for accomplishment? So the Buddha says that there are 4. There's 4 things that are the basis for success, for achievement in one's spiritual practice. So the first one, chanda samadhi padana sankhara. So sankhara means mental activities. Padana means endeavoring, striving, making an effort. Samadhi means the unification of mind, the non-distracted collectedness of mind. So when one is basically putting one's mind in a focused and collected way based upon chanda. So chanda here is translated as enthusiasm, which is not bad. So the word chanda means interest in something, enthusiasm for something. So when one is interested in one's spiritual practice, then one applies the mind in a collected, unified, and focused way. Then the second one, virya samadhi padana sankhara samannagatang iddipadang bhaveti. So similarly, here one is applying the mind in a unified and focused way based on virya. So virya literally means heroism. So the quality of a hero, the quality of courage and persistence and dedication that a hero has. So this courageous dedication, this heroic persistence, which then, so again, once you have an interest in your spiritual practice, then you bring up the courage, the willingness, the dedication to really put your heart into it, to really do the practice with sincerity and courage. Then the third iddhipada is chitta samadhi padana sankhara samanagatang iddhipadang bhaveti. So again, applying the mind in a focused, unified way. And the word chitta here literally just means mind. In some contexts, it can also mean thought or intention. And there's a lot of debate about what its meaning is in the context of the four iddhipadas. Here it's translated simply as mental development, which is a little bit vague, which is actually acceptable because, as I mentioned, the word chitta itself is a bit vague in this context. Elsewhere in the suttas, the word chitta is also sometimes used as a synonym for samadhi. So developing one's chitta is equated to developing samadhi, developing meditative focus, developing a unified, stabilized, clear and focused mind during meditation. It can also, again, mean the application of intention in one's practice. So again, one has an interest in doing one's spiritual practice, one cultivates that heroic courage and resolve to do so, and then one applies one's mind to it. So in this context, application of the mind to doing the practice based upon the previously developed interest and courage. And then that leads to the fourth one, which is after you've done some practice, then the fourth one is vimamsa. So vimamsa means review. So to review and investigate and consider, what did I do? How did it go? Am I making progress? Am I not making progress? What's working? What's not working? What could be adjusted? So this kind of investigation back on one's practice. So Ānanda says, this is the path and practice for giving up that desire. So it's the cultivation of these four iddhipada, these four bases of spiritual success, which again, the first one is chanda, interest, cultivating an interest in spiritual practice. Second one is virya, so courage or heroic resolve. So bringing up the courage, the heroic resolve to do the practice. And then chitta, application of mind. So really applying your mind, putting your heart into it. And then vimamsa, which is review. Reviewing what you've been doing, how it's going, inquiring and investigating the actual effects of whatever practice you're doing. So that you can then adjust your methodology to improve things. So, decent reply, but then the Brahmin says, this being the case, worthy Ānanda, the path is endless, not finite. For it is not possible to give up desire by means of desire. So this is the Brahmin's answer. So the Brahmin says, it's not possible to give up desire by means of desire. Which, of course, for those who are familiar with Buddhism, we know that this answer is not correct. But it's interesting to see how Venerable Ānanda answers this. So Ānanda says, well then, Brahmin, I will ask you about this in return, and you can answer as you like. What do you think, Brahmin? Have you ever had a desire to walk to the park, but when you arrived at the park, the corresponding desire faded away? And the Brahmin says, yes, sir. And Ānanda says, have you ever had the energy? So this is virya, so the courage, the resolve. Have you ever had the resolve to walk to the park? But when you arrived at the park, the corresponding resolve faded away. It says, yes, yes, sir. Next, Ānanda says, have you ever had the idea? So idea here is how Bhante Suddhāso is translating chitta. The word he had previously translated as mental development. And this is a little problematic because then one might not recognize the connection that Ānanda is doing here. So he's saying previously you apply your mind to your spiritual practice. So here he's saying, have you ever applied your mind to walking to the park? So it's like, okay, I want to walk to the park, so now apply your mind to it. And when you apply your mind to it, then you figure out how to get to the park and you do it. So just translating chitta as idea is really not the best here. So the application of mind is better. So he says, have you ever applied your mind to walking to the park, but when you arrived at the park, the corresponding mental application faded away? He says, yes, sir. And Ānanda says, have you ever inquired, so this is reviewed or investigated, again, vimangsa, regarding a walk to the park, but when you arrived at the park, the corresponding inquiry faded away? He says, yes, sir. And Ānanda says, in the same way, a mendicant who is an arahant, so fully awakened being, with defilements ended, who has completed the spiritual journey, done what had to be done, who has laid down the burden, achieved their true goal, utterly ended the fetter of continued existence, and is rightly freed through enlightenment. They formerly had the desire to become an arahant, but when they became an arahant, the corresponding desire faded away. They formerly had the resolve to become an arahant, but when they became an arahant, the corresponding resolve faded away. They formerly had the mental application to become an arahant, but when they became an arahant, that mental application faded away. They formerly inquired or investigated how to become an arahant, but when they became an arahant, the corresponding inquiry faded away. What do you think, Brahmin? This being the case, is the path endless or finite? So here Ānanda is clearly explaining how we use desire in order to bring us to the ending of desire. And the Brahmin replies, clearly, worthy Ānanda, this being the case, the path is finite, not endless. In other words, it is possible to attain the end of the path. It is possible to attain the goal. And he says, excellent, Ānanda, excellent. As if we were righting the overturned or revealing the hidden or pointing out the path to the lost or lighting a lamp in the dark so people with clear eyes can see what's there, the worthy Ānanda has made the Dhamma clear in many ways. I go for refuge to the worthy Gotama, to the Dhamma, and to the mendicant Sangha. From this day forth, may the worthy Ānanda remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. So at the end of this discourse, the Brahmin, who was not Buddhist at the beginning, at the end of the discourse, he decided to become a Buddhist. So at this time, we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'll see if there's any questions. Hello to the people checking in online. Hello to Marielle, Gregory, Jeffrey, Jayanta, and Monkol. And I don't see any questions, so we'll go ahead and conclude at this time, and there'll be another sutta talk this evening. So we'll see you then.